Hello everybody, my name is Eric Terramolins, and today we're going to be checking out Goodsmile companies with Max Factory as the manufacturers, Xenoblade 2's Kos-Mos.
Kos-Mos. Obey strategical multiple operation systems. All systems operational. Are you my master?
I remember the first time I saw that, I was freaking out. But more on this at the end of the review. She's a 1-on-7 and matches very nicely with her Mithra and Pyra counterparts. I don't know about Nia though. I don't have her. When she was released, I had been saving up money to go to Japan and I couldn't afford getting her. Who knows? Maybe I'll get her one day. One day. Just look at how dynamic this pose is. She looks so hardcore. She has a heavy artillery solid vibe and I freaking love it. Her base is extremely weird. On the one hand, there's nothing about it that sings Xenoblade. However, we do have the logo. It's carved in there, not extremely noticeable, especially from the angle that they expect you to be showing her off at. We get all these interesting little robot-y designs, I guess. You know what's crazy? Is that had they painted this transparent base plate a silver and had a couple of cutouts here and there so that we still had a bit of the transparency lines, it would have been awesome. It would have felt like she's standing on the bridge of a ship or on some sort of futuristic panel ground. And because they made the whole thing transparent, they miss out on the whole point of what the base looks like in the first place. And I thought that because it had this odd shape, you'd be able to plug Pyra and Mithra into it to create some ultimate scene with all of them pushed together. But you can't really. You could do something like this, but then you have Pyra's sword right in Kos-Mos's super adorable face, so that's not right. And they all kind of push together decently like this, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel like... Obviously, I'm trying to connect things that don't really connect, and I'm a little disappointed because considering this was the third figure that Goodsmile Company had released from this franchise, it would have been nice to have her interact with the other two. I guess if the swords are pointed outwards like this, it is kind of cool. The base itself is actually pretty solid for a clear plastic. She is pegged in there very well. She herself doesn't get that much wobbling, though the Zohars down here are wobbling, especially the one on the right. I'm always scared that that arm is just going to fall off, but it is pushed in there pretty well, so I think I'm just being paranoid for nothing. And if you look at the base from underneath, you can see that she's very well bolted in. The one positive thing about having a base like this is you can put a light underneath to make the whole thing glow, and for a character like Kos-Mos, that's very fitting. Her shoes, if we can call them that, are no joke. So these are like thigh-high boots, but at the same time, these are her legs. This isn't clothing she puts on, this is actually her. I'm a massive fan of spiked or stilted feet. This is so cool, very pointy with the beautiful little section off toes at the end. I love the gradient that we get in the shading, pearlized white. It's so pretty. And they do not cheap out whatsoever on these feet. Even under the heel, we get this beautiful red coloring. Everything seems nicely sectioned off within different types of molds. I love the carved in panel line work that we get here. Gorgeous gradients on these tiny little blue accents that just make the whole thing pop so well. Her ankles are massive to the point where she hardly has any. This helps at really making the design of the character feel more solid. Just strong, thick, rooted legs that make you feel like her holding these weapons of mass destruction is no problem for her. I feel like every step she would take, there'd be like a crack in the ground. As we go up into these super solid looking legs, there are design cues all over the place. Lovely cutouts and breaks in textures using a more matte black that has some lovely highlights to it. Unfortunately, my figure had a couple of QC issues where I have a little rub off on the paint here on the leg, but from a shelf and depending how she's positioned, I actually don't notice it at all. I was pretty lucky. As we get to the thigh-high part of her boot, gorgeous design work here as well. I find it interesting that the Kos-Mos refrained has all this little writing here, not too sure what it says exactly. However, in Xenosaga, it's Kos-Mos reformatted, and she has something very specific written on her. This is because when I was geeking out on playing this game and I'd gotten Kos-Mos, I'd drawn a picture of her back then, and for real, I I needed to know what was written there if I was going to put it on my illustration. Going into the skin for her thighs here, they're beveled out, showing that they are quite tight inside the boot. The leg is very pale, plasticky, silicone feeling, which is terrific for a robot girl. Her skin along her behind bevels out very prominently, which adds quite a bit of spice to this figure, considering it's not something we necessarily notice on a first glance. The bodysuit she is wearing comes all the way down and wraps around her underpant region, and this too is exceptionally well sculpted, very well shaded, and interestingly enough, the little skirt that we have going over the top cuts out and goes around the underpant body design, which is interesting. You can see a bit of her skin in between the two here. I feel like because her concept design didn't necessarily show this off in the video game so well, they could have gotten away with just it being all one piece along the back, but they went through the hard work of sectioning off the different types of materials and the costume here, which is freaking awesome. As her beautiful skin goes up into her hips, it's well shaped, not too sharp here or there, beautifully defined. As for her micro skirt, which really feels more like just a band of material, this is done with a metallic gray with whiter highlights. It gives it a different texture material effect than we find in the pearlization of her legs and of her bodysuit. It's so beautiful, and I could almost argue that this figure kind of ruined me for the whole concept of textures in the first place. Goodsmile Company really put in a lot of work with this figure, and it shows. Your eye just goes all over the place, and almost everything you're looking at is a massive amount of detail and beautiful, beautiful colors. The micro skirt has a couple of cool robotic attachments. It almost seems like some sort of booster energy thing. I know that when she goes in her super form, she has all these cool energy wings that seem to fly all around her, and this kind of seems like something that it would come out of. As we scroll along the side where we have a super iridescent metallic robot piece, it looks phenomenal. We have so many different pieces of plastic molded together here, even to the point where the back of this thing has robotic detailing to it. It's just, what? Calm down, Goodsmile. For real, don't calm down. I want more figures with this level of detail. As for her bodysuit, it is lovely. It looks like, from the game, a nice pearlized white that goes into a semi-gloss silver with bluish-white gradiented energy cutouts in between. As we go into the side of her suit here, there's beautiful cutouts as well, matte black. Everywhere she would have softer or movable parts of her body seem to be enveloped by this matte black design. And it leads into her back, which is, wow. There's this extremely sharp curvature to it that is almost inhuman, especially with the fact that she's holding these massive weapons. But that aside, it looks so solid for something that you'd think would break her. The spine is phenomenal. Beautiful blue highlights in between all these little things to separate them quite nicely. My one gripe here would be that there's a little too much of the matte grayish black in between each spine spike. I would have put like a darker gloss in between each one of them, so that way they would have sectioned off just a little nicer. But the blue does do a good job at making the little pieces that you want to see pop out nicely. As it goes up into more skin with those lovely shoulder blades, leading into her very solid looking shoulders as the skin bevels out ever so slightly, connecting into the top front of her uniform. Her chest here is a shiny pearlized white. I personally think they put a little too much shading on it, and it would have been lovely if it was a bit shinier like her boots. But I'm really nitpicking here, and it's really not that bad. It looks pretty impressive regardless. In between her chest, we actually have more writing. Her chest piece has all sorts of different types of textures here. We have a matte material going along the top of it, and then we have her lovely heart, or the glowing piece that you'll see on all the Xenoblade 2 blades. Hers is a lovely transparent blue. It looks really pretty. I'm surprised that they didn't give her the same shape as the Zohar for weapons and the blade hearts that you see on Pyra and Mithra, who also have that Zohar shape. I just like the idea that Kos-Mos is special and arguably better than the main characters. Hey, she literally tells you that she's just as awesome in the game.
My battle output is equal to that of Mithra.
Her two arms are quite interesting in the fact that they're asymmetrical. Actually come off, especially this right one here. That's why I'm kind of nervous because it's so heavy, I keep thinking it's gonna fall off. So if you put her on something that's moving all the time, like a computer or something like that, over time it might slide off. I don't know, but I don't put her on a shelf or anything that has any kind of movement going on. I just don't take the risk. Seeing how her shoulder goes into her right arm is awesome. I love all the little robotic clamps and pieces that seem to go in here. So many molds on top of molds and colors on top of colors. It looks gorgeous. We get a little repeat of the robotic design that we get to see on her hip. She has beautiful bicep and forearm muscle definition. Lovely little robotic attachments here and there as we go down into her hand. I think I would have preferred maybe the robotic knuckle pieces here to be a gloss black or something that just sticks out maybe a little more. The matte on top of matte, it makes it kind of hidden and you don't get to see the level of detail that the sculptor put into this. Though we do get a couple of red dots and that's nice. The thumb itself actually looks like a robotic attachment put on afterwards, and that's kind of cool. Whereas her left arm, for the most part, is sporting the same hyper-glossed out, pearlized white. As we get into her left-handed glove, we get some nice sectioned off textures going from the pearlized white to a matte gray to a more glossy gray for the fingers. She's carrying these two weapons of epic mass destruction. These are Zohars. They are the main relic that you see in Xenosaga 1, and it's so cool that they turned them into mega cannons for Xenoblade 2. Conceptually, yeah. It just makes this whole figure look so imposing, solid, epic, badass. This is just so cool. The one little complaint that I have before I get into all the details is the fact that the design of these Zohars and how she's carrying them makes it so that they made one mold and then they just copied the mold and they put them both in her hands. But the design of this thing itself is asymmetrical. So you have this wired out piece on the outside of the left one, whereas on the right one, it's on the inside because it's just the same thing doubled up, where personally, I think I would have liked to see it on the outside. However, this isn't an issue with the figure. This is the initial designer that did this. When you're playing the game, it's exactly like this. So I can't complain about it on the figure, but I'm gonna complain about it from a design standpoint, because I'm just not particularly fond of the fact that they do that. As for the Zohar itself, it's a gorgeous metallic gold, much like the artifact from the first game. Only it's all opened up into this epic super weapon with so much coloration and so much design and attention to detail that it would make your head explode. This thing is crazy. And so many blue areas with lovely little whiter gradients to make everything feel like it's glowing. They didn't cheap out whatsoever on the sculpt for this, and they absolutely went all out with the paint applications because it's just beautiful. Lovely metallic reds, a sweet transparent blue little knife dagger looking thing in the middle that feels like that's what shoots out the energy from these rail guns. And we get some matte and metallic grays here and there to really just balance everything out so that your eye doesn't get bored looking at all of this. Just lovely use of textures. Her neck, which has this beautiful collar, a nice metallic red that cuts around the border, and it has okay sculpting. I think I would have preferred slightly more definition here. Her neck does not, unfortunately, go into her body particularly well. You can see that it bevels outwards quite a bit, as if it's so tight that it's choking her, and I really don't like this. I enjoy when the neck actually slides in very elegantly. They didn't sculpt their product properly, and that's just a disappointment. And it is extremely noticeable if you're looking at her face from head on. However, if you put it on different angles, you don't see it as much. And to make matters weirder, her face isn't actually sculpted into this neck chunk. It's attached and glued on after the fact. So her whole neck attaching to the face, going into the body, is 3 separate parts, along with all the parts of her hair. Why? There's so many times Goodsmile has done this with significantly less molds they have to attach to one another. I just don't get it. Why wasn't the whole face neck all one piece? Her face, however, looks very good. I'm really into super round, cute faces. They're my favorite anime kind of faces. Whenever I'm drawing my own characters in my comic, I make all my characters have cute round faces. I just love it. And Kos-Mos here does not have a cute round face. She has a very sharp, pointy, long face. This is subjective and personal preference. I would have liked this to be a little bit rounder. They put a really strong defining line for her mouth. From up close, it doesn't necessarily look the best, but from a shelf, it looks incredible. It really sells her monotonous expression well from a distance, and I actually quite enjoy this. Her nose is very sharp, but still petite and cute. And her eyes are absolutely lovely with super gloss. I say super gloss because they reflect more than most gloss eyes I have on characters, and it's fantastic. it does an excellent job at making her look like the robot she is. She has this front headpiece that has her hair and an awesome robotic chunk on it. Kind of looks like a little kitty. Clearly done on purpose, but we'll get into that in a second. There's a lovely cutout around the center, which is a transparent clear plastic and metallics on the sculpt underneath to make them really shine and pop. There's these little teeny ears that shoot out the side with that lovely logo of the company that created her in the front. This front headpiece is interchangeable with another one, so she basically just plug and plays. And while the transparency is red on the one where you get to see her red eyes, when you cover her eyes up, you get a clear plastic with a blue metallic transparent piece underneath. Lovely gold design cutout. Almost looks like a little butterfly design attached to this kitty. And with my love for kitties and butterflies, this is just fantastic. And speaking of ears in general, she doesn't have any. She has this awesome robot piece that goes along the back part of her hair and they interconnect together. This thing is freaking awesome. We get Kos-Mos refrain written on it. This robotic piece looks beautiful. Now let's talk hair, because for some of you that have seen a lot of my reviews in the past, you know I'm not particularly fond of transparent hair. I just feel like, personally, I would have rather they painted it in the colors that reflect the illustration. So the illustration's not transparent. It's white or blue or purple or red or whatever. Just color it in. So this way, the whole figure feels like you're looking at an illustration. But I definitely am willing to make an exception for Kos-Mos here. It's so masterfully done. The gradient that we get here is beyond perfection in the coloring department. It sticks out so well. It's got a level of electric blue, metallic, high gloss that just sparkles and shines in a way I've never seen hair shine before on an anime figure. It's so gorgeous. The lighting that you get on this does that anime reflection thing on its own without actually having to illustrate it. And though I do like when it's illustrated, because again, it looks like an anime, this just is phenomenal. It's so beautiful. And the fact that all of this blue that we get slowly gradients into a clear plastic, it still looks so superiorly synthetic. The sculpt work is very well done. However, the sectioning off of plastics and plug-ins that we get here is a little much. Naturally, we get the front piece that plugs into her head because that part is removable, so that doesn't count too much. However, why didn't they just make the hair that envelopes her face removable with these bangs so it all could have been just one big chunk? We get a slight difference in coloration here. It's not all uniform, and that's kind of disappointing. Where when we actually get into the long flowing hair part, this is very well done. All the little sectioned off pieces of plastic we have tend to come from underneath the main layers, and a lot of the cuts that we see are so well carved in there that sometimes you're going to think that's a mold line, and it's not. It's just the carving of the mold itself. Upon her release, she was going for 20,000 yen. That's pretty good. I'd say that she's exactly worth that. I might even say a bit more. We'll get into that in a second. She didn't have a re-release. What's up with that? That's so strange. I thought for sure that they would have re-released this character, but I suppose she's just quite niche. Not only does she come from a game from 2002, 2003, but the fact that she was released in Xenoblade as a character that your odds of getting her in the gacha system in that game are slim to none. It's like 0.01% or 0.1. Regardless, it's so low that most people playing the game don't even know that she's in it, unless they went on the internet and they tried hunting her down, or if you're a completionist trying to get them all, or if you're a major fan like me, you got the game knowing she was in it. She's so amazing in the game, and this figure does an absolute incredibly good job at reflecting how awesome she looked in it. Though I did find that her coloration in the illustration is a lot paler than what we see here, I absolutely love the design choices that they took in the coloration for this figure. And the fact that Hamada, Pyra, and Mithra were 18,333 yen back in the day on their release makes it so that the little bit extra you're going to pay for Kos-Mos, she has so much more going on. The other two figures are beautiful. I'm not dunking on them for that. I'm just saying the amount of detail put into them is like half what you get here. But then again, it's all about liking a niche character. If you have to pay significantly more for her on the secondary market, would it be worth it? I would definitely pay probably 10,000 yen more. Do you think that she's worth that, considering there aren't a lot of Kos-Mos things out there? There are a couple, but this is just Such a definitive version of her. I get that it's the Xenoblade version. If you're more of a fan of the Saga franchises, this might not necessarily hit all the little marks you're looking for, but it comes extremely close. You get that hardcore blue hair girl energy that you get from her, and it also just makes her look as invincible and imposing as she always felt in the older games. And obviously, if you were lucky enough to be able to pull her and play her in Blade, oh my gosh. She's so good. She's basically like Mithra, only she heals at the same time. This is probably the most OP healer in any game because she's dishing out the strong damage when your healer is also the tank and also the main DPS. Hopefully my video review today helped you decide which side of the fence you're on. Is Kos-Mos your favorite Blade from the Xenoblade franchise? If you like my video just a little bit, it doesn't cost much to hold on to that like. Perhaps subscribe, why not? The notification bell will alarm you of future videos. It goes a crazy long way helping support my channel, and I really appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I actually have a funny story about this. When I bought Xenoblade 2, I actually went out of my way to get Xenoblade 2 Torna, and the reason I did this is because when you got the physical copy to this, it gave you some DLC codes you could put in the first one that it gave you like 20 extra gems in an attempt to try and get rare blades. And because of this, you have to play the game for roughly about an hour in to a point where you can try and wish on getting the character that you want. I played that game for about 45, 50 hours, constantly resetting the game in hopes to be able to have Kos-Mos right from the beginning. And I got her. It took me 40 to 45 hours to do it. It was ridiculous just replaying the same beginning over and over again. I hadn't even played Xenoblade 1, and being a massive Xenogears and Xenosaga fan, when the Blades games were coming out, I was at a point in my life where I was working full-time, struggling, trying to pay for my tiny apartment. It was a nightmare, so I couldn't afford to buy or play most of the games that I would have loved to, and it wasn't until years later where I got myself a Switch, where I was lucky enough to be able to get the second one, and I freaking love that game so much. And was the 45 hours of resetting truly worth it to get Kos-Mos that early on? Yes! Yes, it was! She's so good! I would almost say that she's too good, and it definitely made the game a lot easier for me, but I don't really care about that. I wasn't playing the game for its difficulty or being challenging. I just wanted to see the story. I love the anime character designs, and I just wanted a game where I get to feel like I'm home again as a kid, playing something with one of my favorite robot girls. Xenoblade 2 did that for me, and it's probably why to this day I herald that as being one of my favorite games of all time. Though I am being quite subjective on this one.